I am very happy to be talking to Vin Gill, who is a social media and PR specialist, on this auspicious occasion, Social Media Managers Day. Um, Welcome, Vin, and
Thank
tell us
you.
a little bit about what you do and the kind of brands you work for and the kind of work that you do.
So I'm a social media and PR specialist, and some of the brands that I've worked with, just to explain, I've worked across both the private sector and the public sector. So public sector would be local authorities, so a district council and a city council. And then the private sector, I've worked across an array of creative marketing agencies. So most of the clients were retail and tourist destinations.
Tell us a little bit about kind of some of the projects that you've worked on that you've loved, because I think a lot of people who are watching this will be social
Yeah.
media managers. Some people will be at different parts of their career, but what I'd really like to do is kind of showcase the different kinds of work that you can do and how varied it is often. So yeah, give us an example of some of the great stuff that you've worked on.
Okay, so I'm sure a lot of social media managers can relate to this, but it's difficult to pinpoint one favourite or best piece of work.
Yeah.
But I would say at the top of my list, I would say all of my strategy work. So one particular example that I'm proud of is my latest social media strategy. So, bringing over what I've learned from the private sector and from creative agencies, I created an infographic, a social media strategy which I designed from scratch in an infographic version of a strategy.
Nice.
And simply because it's easy to understand, and if you put yourself in the shoes of other people who would need to refer to it day to day, they don't want to read a big thick document, a big corporate document. They just want to get down to nitty gritty and what do I do when I get a negative comment, or how do I showcase a positive group of Facebook or Twitter fans. So that would be one most recent example.
I think that's a brilliant example as well, because
Yeah.
I often say this with reporting as well, that it's still content. It's just content for an internal audience. And actually, the more you can simplify some of this, like simplification doesn't mean taking the meaning out. You just want to be able to have that support around you in the organization where people know what the strategy is. So I love that. And definitely budgets, and it's not just local government, it's like the time. It takes so long to get signed off.
It is. I mean, that's what I was saying. It's two different ends of the spectrum, but I say that in a positive way because you learn a lot. Yeah. And when you've got zero budget, or when you're doing all of the work from research to graphic design to putting everything together from scratch, then you're learning a lot as you go along as well, and you're showcasing your skills. So I found that to be a really valuable experience. A couple of other examples I've got as well. So I'm sure other social media managers can relate to this as well. But I'm also quite proud of building up communities organically. So, day-to-day engagement is very valuable, and sometimes that's quite invisible in our sector because day in, day out, we're talking to these people on social media, we're building up those relationships. And what I've learned is that we're all social animals. We like to be liked. We like it when we get retweeted or our posts are shared. So putting yourself in your audience's shoes, you have to empower them, and you have to give them a platform to express themselves as well. So I'm quite proud of the back and forth in community engagement, because obviously, as you know as well, that's the long-term goal of a company or an organisation, to build up a set of fans, or turning any negative ones around to positive ones. So I find that really interesting as well.
I'm glad you said that, actually, because it's like you say, it's a kind of an invisible part of the job, but it's almost the most important part, to make sure you're always building those relationships. And it takes skill, doesn't it? It just takes skill.
It doesn't happen overnight either.
No, but we can get focused on campaigns, can't we? So often you'll go to conferences and people will showcase a campaign, and they'll show all of this kind of concerted effort around, around one specific thing. But actually the day-to-day stuff is the
Yeah,
beautiful bit. If true
definitely.
social media managers love that day-to-day stuff,
Yeah,
because you get to know people, don't you?
it's great. And then the beauty from that is then once you've built up your relationships, then you've got your top fans. And there's a few top fans that, we know each other by first name terms, and they're like, oh, Finn, have you heard what they're saying in this community group, Facebook community group? And then, it's a two-way thing where they'll give me insight, and then that will inform campaigns or any content that they can share in those groups. So, like I said, it's not an overnight thing, but it takes time to build that trust with people.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important.
I think it takes something that people don't necessarily see as part of the job as well. It takes that personal commitment
It does.
to people, and the fact that you're willing to be known by your first name. And surprising how many people are like try to distance themselves from the job, and they kind of go, no, they can't know me, I'm just an employee.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you need that
You
person
need to.
human
Yeah,
touch, don't you?
you need to. And then the other example that I'm quite proud of as well is training sessions with people.
Mm.
So, I absolutely love to watch the journey of a non-social media person getting that sparkle in their eyes to becoming a social media user. Like it really warms my heart because, from the start they might be like, oh, what's a retweet? How do you use the at sign? But I think if you sit down with people and you visually talk them through when you go at a particular pace and you emphasize that no question is a silly question, then it's this really lovely journey to watch them become, to flourish on social media. I mean, an example I've got for you, Helen. We have a family friend, and he is 83 years old. Now, he was around before smartphones and mobile phones,
Yeah.
and he's lived through a war. But he has his own business which he promotes on Facebook.
Ah.
He always asks for help on how to do a particular thing on Facebook Business Manager, or how to promote a post, or any social media questions like that. And I always use that as an example for when I talk to people, because I really hate it when people say, oh, I'm not going to do social media, I don't understand it. People in our generation
Yeah.
will say, I'm a Luddite, I just don't get it. But I always like to emphasize that age has nothing to do with it. If an 83-year-old can embrace social media from a totally different generation, then there's no excuse for learning a new skill. I think it's the difference between wanting to learn or being fearful of learning about social media, or having that negative perception, which we know that it can be turned around.
Oh, I love that. I love the sound of that guy. And I think that thing about learning as social media managers, we know the real pros know that you never stop learning, that there's
No,
changes every day. There's always something that you can't do to the full extent that you'd like
yeah,
to do it, and all of that stuff. And your 83-year-old man is a good example of the fact that he's coming and
yeah,
asking for help when he needs it, not trying to like position himself as some kind of guru who knows it all.
no,
Just embracing that, and that's the joy
he's
of it.
learned it. Yeah, that's the joy of it. So yeah, I'm
I
really
love
proud of
that.
it. Yeah,
Yeah, and so you should be. I love that. Um, so thinking about your experience in all of these different areas,
yeah.
have you got any tips or any kind of insights that you think, if you were going to give one piece of advice to a social media manager, what would it be?
Yeah. My one piece of advice would be that you are the expert. You should trust your skills and intuition, um, and always learn. So always keep up to date with the latest trends or the latest research. Always and always have fun with it. And remember why you're doing social media, why you love it, because there'll be frustrating moments which you can turn into learning moments. But just trust that you're the expert, you've got the skills and you've got the intuition to do it, and just stick to your guns.
Yes, we need to hear that. Yeah, I love it. I mean, thinking
Yeah,
about keeping on top of trends, tell us a bit about your newsletter, because this is kind of a perfect way for people to keep on top of trends, isn't it?
yeah. Well, like we were both saying, that social media managers can never stop learning. So what I do in the background as part of my own research was that I'm always on Twitter. So I'm always looking at brands and how they engage with people, the type of content that they're putting out and their different approach to community engagement. So I was doing that anyway on a daily basis. So I thought, if I'm doing this, then it would be useful to put it out there as a weekly newsletter, to share with other comms professionals and social media professionals. So I've created my own website from scratch, and I've created my own weekly newsletter from scratch, and that's called Three Things Thursday. So what I do is I look at the big brands, big and small brands, and I deconstruct their social media strategies. So, it could be brands like KFC, when I don't know if you saw it on Twitter a few weeks ago, but they disabled their replies. And they, in the tweet, they said, comment below if you want the old fries back. They deconstructed that. And then other examples that I've recently covered are Instagram using CGI influencers. Got TikTok domestic abuse trends that has obviously spiked throughout lockdown. Gymshark being one of the first sports and fitness brands to use influencers across social media. Wendy's and their sassy tone of voice. Recent blog post was, I've looked at 21 brands who have responded to the Black Lives Matter movement. So I thought that was really interesting to dive into those. Another weird and wonderful blog post that I've covered in the newsletter was prisoner trends on TikTok as well. So I just found putting a newsletter together gave me some accountability, but it allowed me to internalize all the research that I was doing anyway, and just to channel it in the right way, so that I've got the accountability and that I'm always up to date. I'm always learning with that social media research as well. So
I mean,
that's fun as well.
Fascinating to read, and over the course of a couple of months of reading your newsletter, you're really educating yourself. And I think the one thing I want to say about that is, I know how hard it is to put a newsletter together on a monthly basis, but a weekly one, that's a lot of work. So I think not necessarily a lot of work, but it takes a lot of motivation to keep that consistency up. So I take my hat off to you for kind of formalizing all of that research that you're doing.
I've got a nice little system. I've got a nice, anyone that knows me knows that I love lists for lists. So I've got a nice structure. And like I said before, it just holds me accountable that people are reading this content. I need to put it out on a Thursday, and what will my audience find interesting? And it's just fun as well to do, and it's it ticks all the boxes. I'm allowed to do my to be creative with it, but keep up to date with social media research as well. And then the way I look at it as well is that when I'm going through those big brands, I kind of imagine that for each of those brands, you've got, let's say Wendy's, for example, they've probably got about 10 social media managers in their team, but that one tweet is the best of their ideas in that one tweet. So that their strategies are all there for to delve into, to deconstruct. So I just find it really interesting and fun as well.
I love how you're reverse engineering their plans. Really nice.
I know.
Thinking about this, because what I was thinking about that newsletter particularly was it's a very useful thing for people in lockdown. I know lots of people are kind of finding their way back into work, but we don't know how long that's going to last. And it's a great thing to keep people feeling connected and seeing social media, especially if we're working on social media all the time, you can get buried in it and it feels quite a dark place sometimes. So lifting yourself out and reading that to kind of keep an overview on it is really nice. But thinking of lockdown, how has it been for you during this whole bonkers time?
Well, I think lockdown for me, because I'm quite an introvert, so anyone that knows me knows that I love to sit in the corner and I just love to get on with my work. I used to, just going back to when I used to work at the creative agency in Birmingham, because the office was an open plan office, so we had the digital account managers, and then we had the team of creatives who would have their music on, to just help them focus as well. So sometimes I would just take my laptop and I'd go into the finance office to crack on with a project, because obviously no one's going to come into the boring finance office. So lockdown for me was, in a way it was great to have that time to be in the zone and just to get on with the work and just to really delve deeper into the audiences as well, because with lockdown obviously we all experienced it, but talking to the audiences day to day, and I think it's the psychology of it as well, watching their emotions roll out online on a day-to-day basis gave me in particular quite an interesting insight into who the audiences are, how do they feel, and what would make them feel better, and what kind of content is resonating with them, and what's kind of hitting the nerve. So I found it was, it's an unfortunate situation to be in lockdown for some people, but on the social media side, I thought it's very interesting to be able to empathize with the audiences as well.
I think that's a fascinating point as well, because like we teach this in the academy as well, around empathy is the superpower, isn't it? Like the super source for getting content that engages your audience is really understanding it, and the key to that is like finding out what your group of people have in common, and talking about those subjects. And lockdown did give us a really quick, easy shortcut to knowing what they had in common. They were kind of trapped at home. It made life a bit easier in that way. So that's a really interesting point that I hadn't thought of. Hello, I'm fellow introvert too.
Great.
I honestly think that the worst thing that happened in the world for introverts is the open plan office, and that they should stand.
That makes me shudder.
People munching apples, constantly interrupting you all the time.
Chris.
Chris.
The small talk, because I can't take the small talk.
That's an absolute nightmare to me, and a massive barrier to doing anything meaningful for me.
It's all of creative.
I can't deal. I need to focus sometimes, and I get a lot of energy from being alone. So when I'm with people, I love people. Do you know what I mean? I'm not I don't hate humans, but I feel like they take up a lot of energy. So I totally relate to that kind of sitting in the corner of the trying to find a room where no one will find you moment.
It's so great, and it helps you, like you said as well. It helps you be more creative as well, because it's some of social media is reactive, but then you have to be in the zone as well when you're doing certain tasks, and you've really got to be tuned into what you're doing, because as social media managers, we're speaking on behalf of a brand or an organization. So it's very, the messages that we put out, or whatever campaigns we're planning, they are very important, and don't want to be disturbed by crunching apples and crisps. So
just the thought of crunching apples makes me have someone.
I know.
But I call this the idea brew. So I always think of all of the conversations and the stuff that's going on around me as it's like the tea that goes into the tea bag, but I put it in my head, and it needs to brew. It's got to just sit there. No cup of tea is good if you don't handle it in there. Got to let it settle, let the flavour fine. Then
I like
it's ready to be drunk.
Nice.
So, yes, I think that's a really interesting point. And actually, anyone who's watching this, it'd be interesting to know how many introverts are out there that are doing this job, because I reckon we're probably misunderstood. There's quite a few people that might do social media that are more on the need a little bit of quiet time to recover kind of vibe.
And I think with social media as well, being an introvert on social media, it's a place to express yourself as well, without being interrupted by big voices or people just talking for the sake of it. So I think that's where, I don't know about other social media managers, but I think that's where social media managers can express themselves, either through the brand in terms of what the brand or the organizational campaign or strategy is, or through their own channels as well. I just think it's a really valuable platform in terms of expressing.
You've hit the nail on the head for me as well. It's why I always got into it. I've been since the days of MySpace and even Friendster or whatever. But I've always loved social media for that feeling that it's on my own terms. If someone tweets me, I don't have to answer them straight away. And, I like to ruminate on things before I express. I do want to express myself, but not in the same ways that others do. And I love that. That's really that definitely resonates with me. So thank you very much for taking part in this. It's been a fascinating chat. And if anyone wants to sign up to your newsletter or get in touch with you to have a bit of a chat, where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter. So my Twitter handle is @digitalvingil, or they can visit my website, www.digitalvingil.com.
Wow. Thank you so much for taking part. I hope you can find a nice quiet corner now and just be alone.
I am
enjoy.
actually, my desk is in the corner, so.
That's good. Have a brilliant day, and thank you so much
you.
for supporting us with Social Media Manager today. It's been
Thank
lovely to
you.
have you here.
Thank you.